which means there's an average of 5 a year that are perfectly average. And 4 of them might be in the AFC South.
Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast for Wednesday, October the 11th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. Joined as always by producer JT, who you can follow on social media at JT_Runke. JT, you and I both busy packing to head over to London for this weekend. How are you, my friend? Are you keeping all your ducks in a row?
No. None of them are in a row. In fact, all of my clothes are still on my floor, neatly folded though, but not in a suitcase.
So progress. So that's good.
Progress, not enough progress, but you know.
I'm currently frantically doing laundry, pulling out a suitcase, Googling weather, all of those good things. Well, we're going to make it up as we go. But we're excited to head to London to see the Titans take on the Baltimore Ravens this weekend. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that and the team as a whole today with a special guest, friend of the show, Nick Suss, Tennessee Titans beat reporter from the Tennessean. Let's go ahead and bring him on in. Nick, how are you, my friend?
Okay, real quick. Packing is super easy and stop complaining about it. You put stuff that is one place in another place.
That's fair. You know,
well, when you put it like that,
it takes you 5 minutes. It's the easiest thing to do.
If you're good at deciding things,
What's there to decide? Pick up a shirt, say, I'm going to wear this, put it in. You've seen me.
You're making this way too simple.
That's
way
a valid point.
I wear a white shirt every single game. I put a different tie on because everything matches the white shirt. Life is really easy to optimize, and you guys are overcomplicating this stuff. Just put stuff in other stuff. Packing. I moved houses like 14 times in the last 3 years, or last 7 years. I know what I'm doing. Trust me. Just put stuff in other stuff.
See, but you have had so much practice. It sounds like moving and like I have moved like 3 times in my life, and every single time it's been a nightmare, and I hate it. I'm so paralyzed by the details. My OCD brain refuses to let me simplify things. I think the rational side of me understands what you're saying, and it makes total sense. But there's a part of me that refuses to make it that simple.
There shouldn't be any details. Just put a shirt on, put pants on, wake up, move. Like it's easy. Just do this stuff.
There's one thing to be in life. It's efficient. And Nick, it seems you were winning at that part of life.
Mastered the
efficiency. A remarkably consistent person.
I love that. Well, today we're talking Titans, and we're going to lean into the spooky season that is October. We are nearing Halloween. This is one of my favorite times of the year. I love the Halloween vibe. I love scary. I know you're a big film guy, Nick. Are you a scary movie guy?
No, my wife is. That is her passion in the world.
Okay. You don't want anything to do with it.
I don't dislike it. I have learned as somebody, spoiler alert to anyone here, I don't believe in paranormal stuff. So it doesn't scare me. Like I can watch all of these movies and I'm like, why should I be afraid of zombies? They're not going to get me.
Well, that takes the fun out of it, but I understand your point. Your point.
Like there are a lot of the thrillers, a lot of the psychological stuff. Yeah, no, that gets me. But just like a ghost movie, I'm like, okay, yeah, no, that seems like that would be sucky if ghosts were something I believed in.
That's fair. Well, we're going to do a game today that we made up today, completely out of whole cloth. It is silly, it is stupid, but it's a fun way to get us from topic to topic and discuss what I wanted to discuss today, which is the plethora of issues this Titans team has and how severe those issues may be. We're going to play How Spooked Are You? It's going to be a game where we go segment by segment of this team, and we decide, Nick, you and I, maybe debate if we don't land on the same conclusion here, but it's not spooked, sort of spooked, or super spooked by these different elements of this Titans team. So that'll be fun and silly, and we'll get into all of that in just a minute. Got to take care of our wonderful and amazing sponsor, though. First, we are sponsored by BoomBozz Pizza here in Middle Tennessee. They have 3 Middle Tennessee locations in East Nashville, in Murfreesboro, and in Spring Hill, where JT and I do our Thursday shows live before Thursday Night Football almost every week of the season. We'll be missing the next couple because of our trip to London. But other than that, when we get back, just in time for the Titans to go to Pittsburgh for a big Thursday Night Football game, we will be live at BoomBozz covering that, watching that afterwards, doing a show from there, and that'll be exciting. But they make delicious pizza. 4-time winners at the Las Vegas International Pizza Expo, the only company in America to be able to say that they have won Best Pizza in America twice at the International Pizza Championships. It's delicious stuff. They have fantastic selections over there, and we'd love for you to check them out. So check out BoomBozz Pizza wherever you are in Middle Tennessee. Make sure you're subscribed, by the way, to the Broadway Sports Media YouTube page. And if you're watching with us live today on a Tuesday, appreciate you being here with us. Do me a favor, head on over to Broadway Sports Media on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, and then watch this live stream there so that you can be a part of the conversation in the comments and maybe chime in as to how spooked you are about certain element of this team, or maybe you have something that you want us to discuss about this Titans team that we don't bring up on our own. We are open to suggestions. All of those good things can come in the comment section on YouTube. All right, JT, if you would not be so kind as to take us segment by segment through. I've written down in our rundown that Nick is not privy to, so he's really going to be working on his toes here today, ladies and gentlemen. It's all live. We're doing it live, but I already know these questions. JT, can you start us off with this first one?
Sure. Let's start off with a guy that we really haven't seen a lot of this year, and that's Treylon Burks. His start to the sophomore season has been one plagued with a bunch of injuries and a little bit of disappointment. Both of you, how scared or spooked are you of Treylon Burks' start to year 2?
Nick, would you like to go first?
Sure. Are we going on a scale out of, you said 1 to 3?
Yeah. It's kind of like it's a spin on no deal, small deal, big deal kind of thing. Like, you know, typical sports radio, sports television.
Yes, definitely.
Not spooked, sort of spooked, super spooked. Which of those 3 are you on Treylon Burks?
Sort of spooked. We saw him play in training camp. We saw him play in mini camp, all throughout OTAs. He looks like he's a really good receiver. We've also seen 2 years worth of him dealing with injuries now. It's all minor stuff. It's all like unconnected stuff. It doesn't seem like turf toe is connected to concussion, is connected to LCL, is connected to whatever he's dealing with now. But the number one predictor of future injury is always past injury. And the more injuries you pile up, the more concerned you have to be. So I'd be somewhat spooked by that. I'm not overly concerned about his ability to play football, though. The 3 games he played this year, he was underwhelming. They also played some pretty solid defenses. I don't know. I'm not concerned so much about his ability to play football as I might be about his ability to rack up 16, 17 games a season.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I'm sort of spooked, and the sub question here that I find interesting is which is more concerning to you, Nick? The injuries so far, you know, the knee preseason, gets back, hurts his knee again in what we believe to be a different way, but it's keeping him out of games. Is it the injuries that are concerning you more, or what we've actually seen from him on the field?
No, again, I've never been concerned with what we've seen on the field. And I get that he's played poorly at times this year. The Cleveland game in particular was underwhelming.
Right.
But we also don't know how healed he was from the first knee injury.
Fair.
Like, moving side to side is pretty important for a wide receiver. And
yes, it is.
He was slightly limited in his ability to do so. Now, if he comes back and he struggles all year and you chalk it up to, hey, he had a down year, yeah, then you get a little bit more concerned about the production side of it. But right now, it's the best way to catch passes is to be a receiver who is on the field. And he has not been that the last 2 games. And that's really the first hurdle he needs to clear.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I'm only sort of spooked by what we've seen from him so far. I'm maybe a little bit more concerned about what we have seen from him on the field than you are, but there is an element of patience there. Like we are, you know, we've seen three games of him in his sophomore season. I don't even know. Has he played 17 total games in his career yet? If so, it's like,
I want to say it's 14. I think it was.
Okay. Yeah. So he's not even got one full season of starts under his belt healthy, which again, you know, brings up the concern of, can this guy stay healthy? So far, that's a big question mark. But when he is on the field, the thing for me that, again, I'm willing to be and going to be patient on, there are elements to his game that we just haven't seen that were billed as, you know, things that made him a first round caliber player. so far this year in particular, but I'd say in his first season as well, like we really only saw his ability on a repeatable basis to be a downfield threat. And that's great. And that's important. And the Titans need that. But this is a guy that was a yards after catch monster in college. This is a guy that was able to break tackles on a consistent basis, make guys miss, and get a little bit of sugar on the end of a pass and catch that's important for these teams. And is the kind of thing that the Titans in the past with guys like A.J. Brown and Corey Davis and the like were capitalizing on. He's not really shown us that. He's been relatively easy to bring down so far, at least anecdotally, and he doesn't have a ton of yak to his name in the NFL in a limited capacity so far. We also haven't seen a great ability to be a contested catch winner. It's been kind of hit or miss. We've, of course, seen some concentration drops and inability to bring in the ball in traffic. Like, it's those in as far as a route runner, he came out like that was one of his weaknesses, not the most polished route runner. Not many are coming out of college. What I've seen on tape this year hasn't indicated a big upgrade in that yet. I do question, like you mentioned, Nick, the ability to move side to side, like how much of his knee maybe not being 100% kept him from running better routes these first 3 games. But all of that kind of concerns me because so far we've really only seen him be a vertical field stretcher.
I just looked this up out of curiosity. I'll leave it to you to guess. How many times in his NFL career has he been targeted between 10 and 20 yards downfield, like on a true intermediate route?
It's a great question. 5.
11. He's been targeted 11 times, caught 5 of the targets.
Okay.
By comparison, he's been targeted 11 times, 20 plus downfield, and caught 4 of the targets.
Right.
Like, he's just the thing that we think of him being good at in college. He's not, for whatever reason, being afforded the opportunity. Whether it's him not getting open, whether it's the plays not being called, whether it's the scheme being different, whether it's him not being the number one read. There's a lot of different ways you can slice it. But in order to run after the catch, you have to be in the open field. And
this is true. Fair.
He's not being put in position to catch passes there.
Yeah, which, I mean, I could spin as, well, if the team's not asking him to do that, it seems like maybe they think that's not a strength of his. Not like you mentioned, like there's more to it than that. It could just be a scheme thing. It could be they think he's best utilized downfield and they have other guys but whatever the reasoning is, whether they think they have other guys that can do that better than him, or they just aren't asking him to do it, or the times that they are asking him to do it, he's not capitalizing, and so they're hesitant to ask him to do it. Like, whatever that case is, they have hollowed out that middle class of their passing game kind of this season. And a guy like him being able to catch and run in the intermediate field would be really valuable. I feel like that's not a crazy thing to say. So who, if not him, is going to do that for them? So far, nobody's really stepped up to the plate besides DeAndre Hopkins. He's not ever been a yak guy. He's a great target that is going to catch the ball wherever you throw to him, but he's not going to be busting through tackles, you know?
No, one last note, and then we can move on to the next thing. But I was watching back the Ravens game against the Steelers today, and it is very notable how often the Ravens trusted their corners in 50-50 balls on one-on-one coverage with no safety help. And guys like George Pickens and Allen Robinson, who are very physical receivers, were able to win those battles against the Ravens' very good corners. So if Treylon's back, and if DeAndre is playing like he has the last couple of weeks, there are going to be opportunities for the Titans to win without having to have that yak. But you're right. That's been an element of the game that's been missing the last 2 seasons.
I don't. Do you have any reason to believe Treylon will be back this week? I don't get any indication that, like, from what I have heard and just the vibes, I kind of feel like he's not going to play, but maybe that's misguided. Do you have any?
I'm not going to commit to anything other than every single time we have talked to Vrabel about it, it has seemed more and more likely that he would be back to practice this week. Whether that means he's going to be ready to play, who knows? But it seems like they're going to try it at least in practice. Yeah,
I think they'll try. I don't know how much faith I have in them succeeding, getting him to Sunday. But let's move on to the next question, JT.
Yeah, another sophomore guy who is having a little bit of a slump after a fantastic rookie season. Chig Okonkwo, a guy that we are super high on this season, has had some frustrations with him this season, some dropped balls, just not being That guy that we thought he could be early in this season. How concerned and spooked are you about Chig Okonkwo's start to year 2?
This is going to be having to be graded on a curve here because I did not have that high of expectations for Chig year 2. So I am not that spooked because he has done about what I expected him to.
Okay.
And now I'm not saying I expected him to commit penalties and drops and stuff like that, but from a pure production standpoint, he's been about as productive as I anticipated. I didn't really, for whatever reason, buy into this whole breakout top 5 tight end type hype that might have been unfairly supplied onto him a little early before he had played more than 9 full games in the NFL, because he was mostly a reserve for the first half of last season. And
who would have been pushing such a ridiculous narrative? I can't put my finger on who that might be.
The EPA numbers were very skewed based off of low rate usage. And again, we've talked about how I'm not a fantasy football guy, maybe on this podcast before, but really off the podcast. And I feel like that was a very fantasy football heavy narrative of dude's a good sleeper, so let's blow him out. He's a good player. I think he's going to continue to be a good player. I'm not overly concerned about him not being Mark Andrews yet, because look, that's not what I thought he would be this year. He's a guy who is producing as this team's 3rd, 4th leading receiver right now.
3 or 4, yeah, I think so.
That's fine. He's not a superstar, but that's fine.
I'm certainly more spooked than you are on this. I'm somewhere between sort of spooked and super spooked. I'm not full super spooked, but I am more spooked than sort of spooked. And it's because I did come into the season thinking that he could be better than he is. And on paper, the argument that you lay out, I think that's totally fair from a production standpoint, from a, role on the team, wide receiver 3 or 4, that's perfectly fine. Cool. But using my eyes in the context of the games that he's played, the situations he's been put in, there are 2 big things that have me concerned. And one of those is the concentration drops. It feels like every week you have to have one just bad, inexcusable concentration drop for him to kind of get his head in the game. And that's not a thing you can do. And 2, what we saw last season, where every time he got the ball, that high motor, that frenetic energy and that big body with all that power that he has, he was able to, again, break tackles, get a lot of yak, produce for this team in that way on the ground with his legs. We've seen that high motor. We've seen that frantic running style. And he said to us in a press conference a couple of weeks ago, Nick, that every time I get the ball, I'm trying to do the most, which is reflective of the way that he operates once the ball is in his hands. But he's not been nearly as successful this year as he has in the past. And again, it's limited. There's a lot of games left to play. We've not seen a ton of the ball in his hand this season, but from what I have seen, I'm not going to say I have loved it.
No, and that's fair. You have every right to like or dislike what you're seeing from a player. I tend to look at things probably a lot more in the aggregate than most people. So this is more of a me being me thing than a most people being most people thing. But when you look at the puzzle of this offense, how does everybody fit in? Getting Chig going could be really valuable, but I don't think it's going to be the thing that makes this offense run. I would say that DeAndre's more important, that Treylon's more important, that Derek and Tajay are more important. And that's not to say that there's not an important role for Chig to play. And that's not to say that I don't think Chig's going to have some solid games. I think he's going to be a really important figure in this team, especially as they try to get a little bit better in the red zone, which is something that I think Chig can help with, especially as they try to run more on the perimeter, which is something that's been a struggle at times this year. As you do all of these things, you want Chig to be a valuable asset, but I'm not overly concerned that he's look, the 2 penalties on Sunday were bad, but I didn't think one of them was necessarily as bad as the other. And drops are drops. They're going to happen. You don't want them to happen, but you never know. I'm not going to call them concentration or skill or any of that stuff. It's just you drop the pass. The stuff is happening, and you don't want it to be happening, but he's also a young tight end who is still figuring stuff out.
Yeah, let's move on to the next one here, and it's having to do with the quarterback that is throwing the ball to these guys, Ryan Tannehill, who through 5 games has looked not great. If you're just looking at the box score, if you're a box score scouter, like many are online. Last game against the Colts, 264 yards and an interception on 67% of completed passes. He currently has 2 touchdowns to 5 interceptions on the year. How concerned / spooked are you about Ryan Tannehill?
I don't know. The answer. The problem with this Titans team, and I could give this answer for just about every player on the team. The issue right now is that I don't know what this team's average looks like. I know what their bad looks like. I know what their good looks like. I don't know what the middle ground is. And so it's really hard to determine who a player is or who a team is if you don't know what their middle ground is, because that's who most teams are. Most teams are what they are on the average. We know what the Titans are when they look really good. We know what the Titans are when they look really bad. I would say the closest we've seen to average was the New Orleans game, but that was by far Tannehill's worst game. So when you're talking about Tannehill, who is he right now? What are they getting from him? The Titans have the quarterback who is 10th in the NFL in yards per attempt right now. Like, if you just look at the pure production side of it, that's fine. Like, that's not losing you games. But then it's turnovers and it's drives that aren't being sustained as long as you'd want. And it's a rushing attack that's not getting going the way you normally would. And drops and penalties and all these issues that make it really hard to determine who's who. I kind of have to give it an incomplete grade for Tannehill because I thought that he played pretty darn well against the Colts, but he didn't have the big play that you often need, and he didn't have the opportunities toward the end of the game because of how long the Colts were on the field. So I don't know. I think that the bigger question for me is what happens after the bye week. I've always divided this Titans season into 2 phases, the first 6 games and the last 11. So is he going to continue to hold the reins? Who's going to be the active backup? All that stuff gets much more interesting after this week than it has been for the first 6 to me, which is testing grounds.
Yeah, I agree. And the reason I wanted to bring this one up, I am not really all that spooked by this, but the reason I wanted to bring up the stat line in particular is because you've seen it. I mean, I have. I don't know. You stay out of the swamps of Twitter more than I do, and you're probably better for it, Nick. But it's been a very common thing for fans to pull up that very narrow view of Ryan Tannehill, 2 touchdowns, 5 interceptions through 5 games, and say, I'm done with people excusing this guy. I'm done with people excusing this offense. He's holding us back. You got to move on. And obviously that's an incomplete picture of what we've seen from him. Those three of those 5 came in his worst game potentially of his NFL career, certainly of his recent career. And then those other 2 interceptions were really, late game situation, one being a desperation throw at the end of the game against the Colts. That was, the kind of thing you had to do. And then one being a throw downfield to a rookie wide receiver on a miscommunication in a game where you're blowing out the opponent. So not really back-breaking in that way. The 2 touchdowns part is what bothers me, and I have much less of an issue with Tannehill as I do with this team's red zone inefficiency. And we've been kind of harping on that in the media pool. This team for the past couple of seasons has been really efficient in the red zone. They've been fantastic when they've gotten down into that scoring area at getting 7 and not 3. This year, it's been the complete opposite. And it's something that I was talking to our buddy Zach Lyons about this earlier today. And it's an interesting point that he brings up that I'm going to ask the coaching staff next time that we're speaking to them. The past couple of seasons, this team has had an offensive coach whose job it is to do the advanced scouting, putting together the plays they're going to use in the red zone. Last year, it was Tim Kelly. In Todd Downing's offense. It was Todd Downing when Arthur Smith was the coordinator. And then Art Smith was doing it when LaFleur was the coordinator. He goes all the way back to the beginning of Vrabel's tenure. Who's that guy this year? I don't think we've heard anything about that. I don't think we've asked about it, but I'm wondering if is that Charles London? Like who is in charge of putting together that red zone package, doing the advanced scouting to be able to be effective in that more difficult portion of the field against their opponent each week. And do they still have that guy? I'm not sure, but the production on the field is concerning to say the least. Do you think that do you have any inkling, Nick, on what has gone wrong for them, or is there a single thing you can point to and say they have to do this better in the red zone?
The most frustrating thing about being somebody whose job it is to explain what happened in football games is that the answer to almost every single question about that is, well, they messed up.
They didn't do it right. Yeah.
Like somebody messed up, whether it was the call or whether it was one player, somebody messed up.
Right.
And so there's not a trend. There's not a thing you can point to. They are 6-4-17 in the red zone this year, if I'm doing the math right in my head.
Yeah.
You can point to any of those 9 that they failed on, or whatever the number is. I messed up. 14, whatever it is. I can add, I can't subtract.
The many of them that they've messed up on, what went wrong? Right.
If you point to any one of them and say, hey, what went wrong here? The answer would be, oh, they messed a play up. Like, the answer is not, oh, they're in 1st and 20, or oh, they can't block, or oh, they can't do this. The answer is all of it. Like, there isn't one trend. And if there was one trend we could point at to say, yes, this is what they need to fix, I'm pretty sure they fix it. Like,
sure.
The issue right here is just a lack of consistency across the board, is that you're good at protecting one play, but that play maybe your receivers don't get open. Your receivers get open one play, but that time maybe you jump off sides. You stay on sides one play, but maybe this time your guard goes the wrong direction. Like, there's so many things that can go wrong. It's a very complicated sport. And unfortunately, the best teams aren't the teams that play the best the most. The best teams tend to be the teams that play the worst the least. And the Titans have been making mistakes in the red zone. And that's a consistency issue. And any player you talk to, any coach you talk to is going to tell you the Titans need to get more consistent. And the red zone, it's amplified. Third down, it's amplified. These issues get amplified, but it's a consistency issue across the board.
I love that. It's a game of misses. Well said. JT, what's our next question?
Yeah, and kind of more on that point, when you talk about that, they just messed up, and a lot of it comes back to the coaching decisions, and none other is more important than Mike Vrabel's coaching decisions. And that brings up an interesting question. How safe is Mike Vrabel's job security right now? How spooked are you about his kind of tenure here in Tennessee coming to an end?
I don't really feel like there's a hot seat going on right now, and things change quickly in this league. Everybody knows it, but no, I'm not spooked about anything with that. It's very early in a season, and it's very early in a first season with a new GM, and there really isn't much of an incentive to move on. The number one rule of coaching changes is you don't fire a guy unless you can guarantee there's somebody better available.
Right.
And right now, you'd just be firing a guy to fire a guy. You'd just be saying, well, it feels like we should move on, so let's do it. Point to somebody who you think would do a better job. And I'm not saying that to say, oh, nobody can do a better job than Vrabel. I'm saying
right.
Tangibly, you have to have a plan. You can't just go say, oh, we fired our coach, let's find somebody. You have to have a plan.
You can actually, and I think many teams do that every year, but you shouldn't, I think is the
You should not. And I think that this franchise has, for all of its foibles, actually been pretty good the last decade or two when it came to you move on and you have a plan for when you move on. I don't think that there's any logic right now to moving on without a plan.
Yeah, I included this one to be just as a soft pitch opportunity to shut this down, because it's something that happens with every team when things aren't going well. Fire the coach is step one, but there is a growing sentiment amongst fans that Vrabel can't get it done. And I wanted to try to drill down where exactly that's coming from. My conclusion that I came to this morning thinking about it is not that he's not shown the ability to get his team up in big circumstances against, difficult opponents in big games in the recent past, which he has here and there. For me, it's that when was the last time Mike Vrabel had back-to-back successful weeks? It's been a while since there's been just 2 games in a row where you're happy with this team and what they've done and how they prepared for a game and how they came in and executed and their energy. Like, we've been on this up and down roller coaster really since Green Bay of last season, where they just can't string a couple of good weeks together. And for better or for worse, that kind of thing's going to be attributed back to the head coach getting his team mentally and physically prepared to come into a ball game and be successful. And he's not done that in a while.
So I have a theory about coaching, and
Okay.
I don't know if I've ever said it on your show. I say it a lot, but here's my theory. The bottom 5% of coaches are going to lose you games.
Right.
The top 5% of coaches are going to win you games.
Mm.
The middle 90% probably don't matter that much.
Mm.
And this is me being somebody who always values the talent and production of players over the talent and production of coaching.
Right.
I'm not saying that coaching doesn't matter, but I'm saying there's a harder cap on the limit that coaching can set you up to win than there is on the limit that players can set you up to win.
Sorry, go ahead.
And my point with all of this is the Titans players aren't as good as some of the best team in the NFL's players.
Right.
That's not to say the Titans are a bad team, but we see where the caps are. We see what the cap is on coaching, what the cap is on players. The talent matters. Like, let's not get overly college football about it, but it's the same argument as recruiting matters. Like, you just need to have really good players, and the Titans have a lot of good players, but other teams have more good players. And I'm always going to say that's an issue before I'm going to say coaching is an issue. Because what can we point to and say, this has been a coaching problem this season? Like, what can we tangibly say is a coaching problem?
Definitively, it's difficult for sure, because there is such an ambiguity with what does and does not, what does a coach actually have influence over? Like, what does their touch, how far does that reach? But I think a lot of people look at, well, the Titans on the road have been miserable and looked like a different team than they've looked like at home. They've also not been able to string multiple, back-to-back weeks together. Like, is this team too emotionally high and low? Is this team not being coached in a way where they're getting up for these road games in a way that's going to allow them to win ball games? I mean, I love your theory and I love your point, but it makes me then ask, I think people for a couple years now have considered Vrabel one of those top 5% coaches that can win you games. He is given a lot of credit in the media, and at times I think rightfully so, for being a guy that is able to will an inferior team, like you mentioned, this team roster-wise inferior to some of the teams they're playing against, and yet in the recent past, Vrabel's been able to get that team to win regardless. He's been in that echelon of guys like Kyle Shanahan, who people consider the kind of coach that can win you ball games, right? Bill Belichick forever, Andy Reid. Mike Tomlin is that way in Pittsburgh. John Harbaugh in Baltimore. Like, is the argument that maybe he's given too much credit for his ability to impact the Titans' win and loss?
No, the argument is that you just rattled off 6 coaches, and 6 coaches is 19% of the NFL. That's a lot bigger than 5. Right.
So you're saying that it's actually way less of them than people perceive the number to be.
Yeah, and again, this is my number. You can put the number wherever you want.
I was going to say 5%, that's like 2 or 3 guys. Who are the 2 or 3 guys?
That's kind of the point I'm making, is that you can be the 6th best coach in the NFL, and that makes you an incredible coach. I don't know if it's winning you games. I really don't know. This is me being I love data. I'm a quantifiable guy. I'm not going to sit here and talk out of my butt, but this is me kind of talking out of my butt. This is me saying, here is how I view sports. Mm-hmm. I think that the players matter even more than we give them credit. And I think that coaching probably matters a little less than we give it credit for. And you know who would agree with that? Is Mike Vrabel, who has said time and time again that players win games.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. All right, let's keep motoring along, JT. What else we got?
Yeah, we can move on to coming kind of full circle here, as we touched on as well. Tim Kelly has also had kind of a roller coaster season where he's looked very good in the play calling in some games, and then some other games are just frustrating, and the Titans are not able to get anything going at all. How spooked are you about Tim Kelly's play calling and coordinating so far this season?
A little. Like, I don't know.
Sort of.
I'm not at all.
Like, there is a part of me that is curious about what's going on, because I feel like this offense is kind of straddling the line between doing what it used to and doing what it's trying to optimize to do.
Right.
And that I feel like there are ways to kind of pick a side or pick a lane, and I don't know if they've always conformed to the lane they seem to be going towards, but I like the direction they're going. So I'm not concerned from a direction perspective. It's more of a why is it gradual perspective. I feel like we all see the tide turning with the running game. We all see the tide turning with the tempo. We see this team going in a direction. And I think that's good. I think it's a good direction to go in. But sometimes they'll do something else. And that's kind of the lack of consistency thing I'm talking about, of if you're doing something, do it. And maybe I'm just wrong here. Like, I'm wrong a lot. And I know that's not what you guys want to hear from a guy who you brought on your podcast to be an expert. But, like, that's the only thing that's concerning to me, is that the identity hasn't been 100% pronounced all of the time. It feels like it's 85 to 90% pronounced. And then sometimes they'll do stuff that feels like it's out of a different offense.
I totally agree, but I'm not concerned, because I feel like it's fair to give a new coordinator a period at the beginning of his job with that new team to kind of feel out what they want their identity to be. And because of, he's new, it's a new playbook for this team. There's a lot of new moving pieces on offense. I also, the tape will tell you pretty obviously that Tim Kelly is wanting to do some newer, modern, cooler things with this offense. And he is regularly being hamstrung by, like you mentioned in our last topic, the fact that he doesn't have the best players necessarily to be able to, like, he's kind of hamstrung by what he's working with. And so I totally sense what you're talking about, where I think at times he feels obligated to go back to what they've done in the past because the new stuff he's trying isn't quite working, or he doesn't feel like they're at a place yet with the talent they have. Maybe the protection they have up front, that offensive line on tape, you can tell it gives him a lot of troubles, and the play design is sound. The execution from the skill position players is sound, and nothing works because the blocking isn't there. Because of all of that, I'm not really spooked by it at all. I think that we've gone from last season, an offensive coordinator who was actively holding this team back with his lack of creativity and lack of either ability or willingness to adjust, to a guy that is kind of the opposite of that and is doing his best through 5 games.
Yeah, that's a fair way to put it.
Yeah, we can move on now to the defensive side of the ball. And what was supposed to be a strength of this Titans team in their pass rush has been awfully quiet lately in these past 2 games, not really getting to the quarterback as much as you would like them to. How spooked are you about this front seven's ability to get to the quarterback?
Get to the quarterback, not spooked. Bring the quarterback down, very different story.
Okay, yeah.
I will say I believe that pressures are more important than sacks. I think sacks are unpredictable. It's more important how often are you getting back there. And I will vamp and talk a little bit as I pull it up, but I'm fairly certain statistically this team's really not that bad in pressure rate. Like, where are they right now? I've got this pulled up. They're pretty far back down. Yeah, they're like bottom 12 in the NFL in pressure rate right now, and that's not great. Like,
No, it's not.
I think that there is a little bit of concern just based on the way the Colts offensive line played really well. But you also look at some of the plays where the Titans did get home against the Colts, and the Colts still made plays. Like, I thought that the Titans were going to have the best defensive front in the NFL this year. Like, I will say that.
As did I.
They don't right now. Like, there's a modicum of concern that I had really high expectations and they haven't lived up to it. But I also think that when the strength of your pass rush comes from the interior and not the perimeter, there's going to be inconsistency because interior pass rush is just harder to do. And so when Danico Autry and Jeffrey Simmons are probably your two best pass rushers, it's tougher for that to be something that's affecting every game versus if you have a Aiden Hutchinson or TJ Watt or Nick Bosa or Micah Parsons or any of these guys that are dominant this year, Myles Garrett, obviously, you're probably going to get a play or two a game just because that's what that position does.
Yeah, I love the last point that you made. I'm super spooked by this. This is the thing that I'm most concerned by because that expectation is so drastically different in comparison to what we've seen so far through 5 games. Again, not to a point of like giving up on this defense or, being truly concerned that they're not capable of being what we thought they could be. I still think that it's possible that by the end of the season, we'll talk about how they got on their horse eventually. It just took a while. But the last point that you made, where the strength of your pass rush being, one that comes from the interior, which is not very common when you think about great pass rushes in the league, it does usually center around one of those stud edge defenders, like you mentioned. That is a recipe for more inconsistency. And you think back to the past couple of seasons, especially 2 seasons ago when the Titans pass rush really started to dominate, especially in the back half of that season. That was when you had Harold Landry playing at his best. It's when you had Bud Dupree starting to play, I think, the best ball that he did here in Tennessee. And then you had and Danico Autry was operating well from the edge as well. Like you had guys on the outside playing as well as you had in a guy like Jeffrey Simmons, who wasn't quite the interior pass rusher that he is now. Back then, he was starting to come along on the inside. Now it's Autry and Tart and Simmons on the inside, who you're banking on, with Landry still really being hobbled, it seems, on the outside. And, some guy like Weaver. Weaver is a very, I think, mediocre, inconsistent pass rusher. If I'm being honest, you've got Travis Gibson, who's getting in there more often, but you're not expecting a ton of work from him. I totally agree with you. And I think that the composition of this pass rush, the way that it's built, naturally is going to bring more inconsistency.
And inconsistency might be too strong of a word. The real issue is that it's just tougher to get through guards and centers because you're often double teamed.
Right.
It's not even about these guys are playing inconsistently. That's not the point I'm trying to make. And I don't think that's the point you're trying to make either.
Yeah.
It's just not the easiest route to affecting the quarterback.
Yep.
And then building off of this one, another piece of this defense that was supposed to be spectacular going into the season is the run defense, which has been slipping the past 2 weeks, giving Joe Mixon his best game of the season in terms of yards per carry. And then Zach Moss also having a career day last week, going for 165 yards, an average of 7.2 yards per carry. That did have a long rush of 56 yards. But the point still being is that how is this defensive slippage that the front seven are having right now? How concerned are you about that?
I'm going to disagree a little bit on the fact that they slipped against the Bengals. Joe Mixon had like a good drive and a half. Like they completely shut him out after the second or third drive of the game.
Did they, or did they just stop needing to run because they were so far behind? Like in that second half, they still ran somewhat effectively with him.
A shutout is a shutout. It doesn't matter how it happens. Like the dude had 2 really good runs, like a 9-yard and 11-yard run or something in the first quarter, and after that, he wasn't all that effective. Like,
so does the absence of Tart last week explain away the Colts' performance then?
No, the Colts' performance is explained away by the Colts' offensive line played really well. Like,
okay, fair, yeah.
Like,
I agree.
I'm not going.
I do think missing Tart was a big part of that. To be fair,
I think that missing Tart was a factor, but I also think that if you look at the long run and look at Azeez being completely guarded off the edge or blocked off the edge to a point that there was a complete crease because he couldn't get over, and Gibbons was getting pancaked at the same time, and Byard had to defend the quarterback, so he wasn't in the back of the defense. And like,
but didn't you have the guy on the interior that was in the position where Tart would have otherwise been, getting pushed backwards into Azeez? Like that's the kind of play where he's going to get an arm on the runner most of the time.
But that's my point, is that an arm doesn't bring a guy down. Tart was going to help, but the whole identity of this defense is the swarming factor of it. Is that everybody is always collapsing towards the ball. And for whatever reason, all 11 guys weren't collapsing towards the ball last week. That doesn't seem like a one-person problem to me. That seems like man, hats off to the Colts. They blocked that game really well sort of thing. Now, if this happens again, yeah, I'll start to be concerned. The Ravens love running the ball. Go back and watch the touchdown that was it Hill had?
Justice Hill, yeah.
Hill had in the first quarter against the Steelers.
A guy that I convinced JT not to start in fantasy this week, by the way. Shout out.
An absolutely gorgeous play design where it was a read option. Lamar Jackson's here, Justice Hill's here. And it looks like the read is going to be Lamar coming at the end or Justice Hill going the other way. But what actually happened is Lamar reads the defensive end coming upfield, hands it off, and then Justice Hill counters back, and all of the blocking is pulling towards the side. So they were going that way either way, but they just took the defensive end out of the play by saying, we have you blocked and not blocked. We have figured like Todd Monken's got some really cool, sophisticated run plays that are going to be difficult for the Titans to corral. But after one game, I'm not. They had a really bad game. Hats off to the Colts. If it happens again, I'll be spooked. For now, I'm not spooked yet.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. I'm with you. I personally think that Tart is a big element. I think he's the most valuable run defender on this team. I would have told you that before this game. I certainly believe it now. They have a sample size in the last 18 games of 17 really, really good ones, or 16 really, really good ones against the run. One bad game against a divisional opponent that, divisional games, there's always an element of strange unpredictability that always comes along with those. Doesn't bother me that much. And if Baltimore hangs 195 rushing yards on them in London, then I think it'll be time to pound the alarm a little bit.
Yeah, and then our final question here, one final part of the defense that we have not talked about yet, the secondary. How concerned or spooked are you of not their ability to continue to not play well, but their ability to improve? How concerned are you that this is just going to be it for the year and that they cannot get any better than how they've been playing?
That's an interesting way to phrase it. I do think that most of the things they're doing wrong are correctable.
Okay.
So when it comes to the question of, am I spooked about their ability to improve? No, I think there is an ability to improve. The bigger question is, are these people going to improve? And that I just truly do not know the answer to. I will say, I've thought Roger McCreary's had a good year. I've thought that Sean Murphy-Bunting has had more or less a pretty good year.
Yeah, agreed.
I think Amani Hooker's had a good year. I think Kevin Byard, obviously they don't throw at him very much anymore, but as a run defender, he's had a great year, and he's still one of the better players in the league. We're all essentially talking about Christian Fulton right now.
Right.
I'm not going to say I am an expert in how cornerback play works. I'm not going to sit here and say I know specifically what he's doing wrong. And I don't know. Like, what I do know is that the mistakes tend to be gravitating towards one area when they're happening. And the mistakes seem correctable. It seems his eyes are in the wrong spot one play, or he makes a mental mistake here, or he doesn't get his hips lined up the right way, he doesn't get square. All of this is technique, and technique is correctable. But also, he's been in the league 4 years. Technique didn't get invented this year. Like, these are things that he has been doing or has been taught to do. And there have been times in his career where he has been very, very capable of doing this stuff. Let's not pretend that he's coming off the assembly line this week and it's like, oh, rent a corner, what to do?
Right.
Like, he has played well at times. He's played really well at times. He played pretty darn well against the Bengals a week and a half ago. But the consistency hasn't been there. And those mistakes, cornerback, I'll get lambasted by the purists for this. Cornerback is the hardest position to play in football. And
yes, of course.
And I'm counting quarterback.
Oh,
It is tougher to play corner than it is quarterback. Because rules,
I'll agree that it's one of the two.
The rules are stacked against you when you're playing quarterback.
Yes, that I think there's a very fair argument to be made there that yes, that you look at that play Alec Pierce makes at near the end of the game, runs directly through Christian Fulton. Is that a penalty? Sure is. Is it fair to the cornerback? Not really. It's just the way that.
This is a digression. It's a pure digression, but
okay.
I'm just going to make you estimate off the top of your head. How many quarterbacks, QBs, are there in the NFL who you would consider to be good? Just rough number.
It's the definition of good.
18.
I was going to say a little bit more than half of the starters. So yeah, like 18, 20.
All right. How many cornerbacks would you say there are in the NFL who you think are good?
It's roughly that number. Maybe you could argue a little bit fewer. I think that there's probably at least 16 good cornerbacks.
I'll
in the
say
NFL.
12.
Now, how many quarterbacks do teams start?
One.
How many cornerbacks do teams start?
A couple more than one. Yeah.
Usually 3, right?
Yeah.
So if we're saying 18 out of 32 NFL quarterbacks are quote unquote good, and we're saying 12 out of 96 NFL starting cornerbacks are good, it's an impossible position to play. That is not abdicating, or I used the wrong word there. That is not allowing people to be bad at the position. You should not expect your cornerbacks to be bad. But realistically, most cornerbacks aren't good because it's impossible to play that position well for a long time. Look at Josh Norman. Look at Richard Sherman. Look at Darrelle Revis. Look at the guys who were the best of the best for like 3 years.
Right.
And then were out of football a couple of years later. Like Alteron Werner, when he was with the Titans, I think there were 2 or 3 years where he was a top 5 cornerback in football and just kind of wasn't after that. It's such a tough position to play. And
J.C. Jackson is the stud in New England, and then he can't get on the field in L.A. Right.
I have no basis for saying this other than it feels correct. So if I'm wrong, please prove me wrong. I would assume the turnover rates at all pro positions at cornerback are shockingly high compared to the rest of the league. Because, like, being the best cornerback in the NFL 2 or 3 years in a row, you get the vote if you're Jalen Ramsey on name recognition, but
right.
I don't know. It's so difficult to play cornerback well. And that's why, like, JT, when you phrase the question as, is it correctable? Yeah, no, of course. But, like, will it be corrected? I don't know. The best cornerbacks in the world can give up big plays and get penalties called on them and stuff. Like, it's just not a position that people play well.
All right. I think that's a great note to end on. That was How Spooked Are You? Thanks for playing along with our silly game, and I appreciate everybody watching with us live. Before we get out of here, JT, we got a couple of things in the news that we need to get to. So hang with us real quick, Nick. Let's talk about what is in the news. JT, what do we got?
Yeah, we can start with a few Titans transactions, and one to be specific. The Titans yesterday announced that they were releasing Jaden Peavy off of the practice squad. Any thoughts on this, or just another routine move here for the Titans?
Did not play well on Sunday. I don't think that they've been very happy with him since the preseason, which he was one of the guys that looked really promising in the preseason. They spoke like he was a promising player in training camp, and it's just not really worked out for him. I don't know, Nick. Do you have any further insight on Jaden Peavy's role with this team?
I used to cover baseball, and I would tell people all the time, hey, yeah, the team you love, your first baseman's not hitting right now. The other 8 guys are hitting. Who cares if your worst hitter's your worst hitter? If the 53rd guy on your roster is not that good, he's the 53rd guy on your roster. Like, I had high expectations for Jaden Peavy this year, but if your 5th defensive tackle is not producing at the rate you want him to, you're going to be fine.
Good take.
Yeah, moving on now, just kind of where we are right now as the Titans head over to London. Of course, the Ravens are already there, but the Titans will be there soon, taking a little bit of a different approach than the Ravens. Right now, the line for this game started at 4, but the Ravens are 3.5-point favorites now over the Titans in Sunday's game in London. Lamar Jackson, though, this is interesting, has not lost a back-to-back game since 2021. And over the last 2 years, Jackson is 5-0 after losses with 7 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. So main point of this is going to be if you can get to Lamar Jackson, you have a chance to win.
This game's an interesting one because I feel like it has potential to be one of two things. Either it is your classic Titans-Ravens rock fight, and it's entertaining and gross and somebody wins close, or the Titans kind of get trampled. Maybe I'm wrong and it's another Bengals situation where for some reason they handle business really thoroughly, and I'll be even further confused on what this team is if that's the case. But I think there's an opportunity for the Ravens in this game to win handily if they play their best ball and the Titans aren't significantly improved from last week. Nick, what are your expectations for this game?
Something dumb's going to happen.
Okay.
That's my whole thought.
Okay.
I don't know what it is, but something very dumb is going to happen in this game. You got 2 teams traveling a long way, 2 teams coming off of losses, 2 teams with, shall we say, inconsistent offenses this season. I don't necessarily know if the team that plays the best is going to be the team that wins this game. I think the team that benefits the most from the dumb thing is going to win.
So vague. I love it.
But that's kind of my view. What you're describing as a classic Titans-Ravens rock fight
is something dumb.
Something dumb's going to happen.
Right. That's fair.
There's going to be some foolishness.
Okay.
I don't know who's going to cause the foolishness. I don't know what the root of the foolishness is going to be.
Right.
I don't know if it's going to be Miami against Georgia Tech level of foolishness, or if it's going to be basic run-of-the-mill foolishness.
Right.
But expect some foolishness.
If it's Miami, Georgia Tech level of foolishness, it's going to be a time. It's going to be a story. It's going to be fun dealing with the masses after that one. JT, anything else in the news?
Yeah, finally, even though the Titans are 2-3 and could move to 2-4 with a loss against the Ravens because something dumb inevitably happens this week, it's interesting to see how close all of these teams are in the AFC South so far. And if you look at the tier list here between offensive EPA per play and defensive EPA per play, it's really interesting that if you look right there in the middle, there's just a whole division.
How about
there's
that?
The whole division. The Colts, Jaguars, Texans, and Titans are pretty much evenly matched through this week 5 here in both offensive EPA per play and defensive EPA per play. So, case in point, this division is nowhere near over.
Yeah, it's a mid-off for the ages. I mean, this division is as based on EPA at least, and I think that my eyes tell me that this is pretty accurate. They're all right now, and things can change. It's a long season. Right now, they all seem very mediocre. They all have significant flaws, and they're all capable of winning most every Sunday, which makes for an interesting division race. And maybe we get this weird Like, everybody's 500 to the end, and it's 4 teams that all have mediocre records, and there's a razor's thin edge between who moves on to the offseason and who does not. But I don't really see anybody running away with this division at all this year. Nick, what do you make of this division so far?
I just really, all I want to say is that the funniest part about this graphic, because I saw this earlier, you cut a team off. There are only 31 teams on this graphic because the Browns' defensive EPA per play is so staggeringly high that they don't fit on your crop.
They're in the moon. You're totally right. I'm looking at both the original and this right now, and you're totally right. They're in the stratosphere.
I love that a team's defense can be so high that it breaks rectangles. But about the division, what you said, there's a lot of average teams. The NFL is made up of average teams. I wrote a story on this week, and if you guys want to read it so that all of my 2 hours worth of effort are not in vain, I counted every single team dating back to the merger in 1970 that had a winning percentage at the end of the season between 40% and 60% and had a point differential at the end of the season between -30 and +30.
Okay.
Your pure mid average teams.
Did you get a percentage of teams that were that?
I'm doing it right now for you. So over the course of 52 seasons, there were 268 teams that did that, which means there's an average of 5 a year that are perfectly average. And 4 of them might be in the AFC South.
That's amazing, and I think a very fair take and a very funny one. All right, that is producer JT with the news, and that is our show for today. I appreciate Nick giving us his time and quirky, funny insight. Appreciate you joining us on short notice, Nick. What besides that article that we're going to go read after this should the people be checking out from you?
Yeah, keep an eye out for an article that's coming out tomorrow morning that is me slowly going insane trying to answer the most obvious question in human history.
Okay.
Just a plug for your viewers to keep an eye out, because I did way too much research and reporting for this.
So we're gonna keep the question under wraps.
I'm telling you the question now.
Okay.
As the Titans head over to the country of England, the United Kingdom, I tried to answer the question: when did people start calling Derrick Henry king?
That is a very well-timed article and a very simple question that I don't know the answer to. Did you feel like you got to the bottom of it?
Yeah, and it's a weird story.
Okay.
One that, well, I'll let you guys read it, but let me just say, Derrick might disagree with something that Derrick has said. Like past Derrick and present Derrick kind of conflicting each other.
Interesting. What a great plug. What a great tease. We'll check that article out for sure. Tomorrow, you said, comes out on Wednesday. All right, Wednesday morning. Check out that article in the Tennessean from Nick Suss and all of his other fantastic work. Appreciate you, Nick. Appreciate you, producer JT. Appreciate all of you that caught the show live or afterwards. Next you hear from us, we will be in London covering this team from there, talking on Thursday/Friday's episode about what this team has to do in order to beat a good Ravens team on the road at home on the road in London. Make sure to check out that episode on Thursday live or Friday in post. And then on Sunday afterwards, we'll be reacting to whatever foolishness, whatever tomfoolery goes on in the Titans-Ravens game. Check out all of that this weekend. Appreciate both of you guys. For producer JT and our guest Nick Suss, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. We will talk to you on Thursday.